Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, an analytical hypnotherapist and psychological astrologer. And so I get to say she's back because I am with Tammy Billups. Hello, Tammy.
Hello, Anna. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for
So,
having me again.
it's an absolute pleasure, and I think there's the thing to say is you're here because I've been reading another of your wonderful books, and it's called Animal Way Showers. And so I think a good place to start is to answer the question, what is a way shower?
Yes, I'd love to explain that because I know it's one of those words that's not necessarily mainstream and not necessarily in the Webster dictionary. A way shower, if you break it apart, it's showing us the way, right? These are way showers are the sparks of the divine. I mean, as we know in people, there's so many light workers, but way showers kind of takes it up a notch. So those are the beings that have come to serve in a grander scale, a larger capacity, and have incarnated intentionally to create a new time on earth. And then also a way shower can really, just by emulating a way shower, I mean, they could be holding this transform, what I call transform presence. And just by being around them, it can raise your vibration. And sometimes they're not necessarily, speaking in front of thousands of people or even animals that are, serving it as, many, many beings, but they have the ability to hold a higher frequency. And just by doing that, they are changing all of those beings that are in their wake.
It's funny because not many people would think of animals in that way. And yet there are times when we witness animals showing sensitivity and insight through their actions that is quite extraordinary. And it's just listening to you has brought back a memory of an incident about a year, 2 years ago, in which a friend of ours has a beautiful Airedale as part of her life. And this Airedale was at the time very young. And anyone who knows Airedales know that they are big and fearless. They were used in the First World War in the trenches to as messengers. So they would be carrying messages around because they were not fazed by the gunfire or anything like that. So it's that fearlessness that's there in the breed, very adventurous. And we were somewhere where there were horses. They're not horse. The horses are not everywhere, but occasionally you will come upon a horse rider and their horse. So on this particular day, we were out walking in the heath, and she decided she saw a horse, and before we could stop her, she ran at the horse, not to the horse, at the horse, and started to try to grab its tail. It was a very dangerous situation for the horse rider as well as for her, because the rider could have been thrown off, the horse could have kicked her. It could have been a very nasty situation. And we were standing there helpless because this was at quite a distance from where we were. Obviously, my friend was running towards her, but no way was she going to get there in time, because dogs move fast. And thank goodness dogs do move fast, because out of nowhere, almost in a ghost-like manner, appeared a collie. And this collie took one look at the situation and knew exactly what was going on. And there's no question in our minds that that collie didn't know what was going on. The collie knew, because what it did is it used its herding ability, stepped between her and the horse, and then did did the equivalent of saying, hey, that's not a really good idea. How about we go this way? And lured her away from the horse. It was extraordinary. And my partner and I were only talking about this the other day because we're at the exact same location where that had happened. And it came to our minds. We were talking about it, that extraordinary collie. Where did it come from? And as soon as it had appeared, it seemed to have disappeared. Now, I'm not suggesting that there was anything supernatural about this, because I don't think there was. I think what probably happened is that it went back to its people, um, having done its job. It saw something that needed to be done, did the job, and went off again. But it was just an extraordinary thing. And so when you witness animals behaving like that, it doesn't make what you're saying seem unlikely. It makes it seem very likely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an extraordinary experience for you to witness, and knowing that you didn't miss the messages because that dog showed up for everyone around it, you know. And animals, they just instinctively lean into this level of service. The more connected they are, I mean, some animals are more intuitive obviously than others, but there's a larger percentage of animals that are maintaining their connection to source and instinctively responding in the moment like that. And I love that story. I got chills when you were talking about it, because clearly that dog, was, following its innate guidance to, and who knows, I always think, was there some angel that popped in it as well, and just said, here's what we need to do in this situation, to ward off, anything dangerous happening. So what a fabulous thing to witness for you.
I think I'll always remember that. It was one of those things where there was also this feeling of unreality to it, probably because we were in a heightened emotional state, because we were so afraid of what we could see and that sense of powerlessness. So for that reason, there's that feeling of having stepped out of ourselves, and that time just stands still in those moments, and you're kind of not breathing. So
Yes.
that for that reason, it probably still has that flavor of unreality.
Yes, and our vibration just drops, right? In that moment of fear, it just plummets, and then out of nowhere this animal says, "No, my vibration's just fine. Here's what we need to do here." And oopsie, okay, this is okay, back to play. It's just extraordinary, and that really does define a way shower, of that ability to maintain that frequency and respond accordingly without hesitation, just in being in the present moment.
Well, here's a funny thing, because as I'm talking with you, something's occurred to me, and it is this: that we are inclined to think of animals showing us, the humans, the way, in this context, which is a very typically human centered thing. And I don't mean that as a criticism to humanity, because we are what we are, and we're only going to see things from our perspective. Of course, we have to work to see things from other perspectives. But as we're speaking, a question's occurred to me, which is, to what extent are animals also showing each other the way?
Hmm. Oh, I think that's happening as well. I mean, and we see that happen. We see the enlightened ones in the house that are that the younger animals are emulating in some manner. Absolutely, and it's the same for people. It's the same for people. Same
It is.
thing. The higher vibration that we're able to hold, and the animals able to hold, the larger their wake of influence.
Can you give some examples that you've come across of animals helping each other, showing
Ooh.
each other the way?
Well, I don't, because I don't work that much with two animals at a time. I don't know that I have a client example, but certainly I hear from clients all the time about how, they have one dog that kind of, grounds the other ones, and I think we've all kind of had that. I know I have one cat in particular, Mai Tai. I called him Mai Tai guy. And he, for my other cat Sundance at the time, she would reflect my kind of more anxious self. And and then we had Mai Tai come in, and he would just get in the middle of us like, it's okay, grasshopper. And he would do the same thing for her. I mean, she would get where she would just sit and meow really loud at something when she wanted, something that she wasn't getting, or sometimes she was just moving out energy, and he would just walk over to her and put his paw on her back, and then she would kind of lie down, upright, lie down, and then he would just stay in that pose with her until she regulated. And then she'd start breathing, and then he'd remove his paw, and all was well in the world. I mean, he was the one. I think all of us have had one animal, probably we animal lovers, that get multiples and have lived our life uh, by trusting the safety of those relationships and growing with them. I think all of us have had one, probably way shower, that really was remarkable in our journey, that we'll never forget. And doesn't take away, of course, everybody's where they are on their journey. Doesn't One's not better than the other. It's just some have been around the block a few more times. And those are the ones that we learn from, the gurus that have been through a lot. And so animals are in the same boat, in that there are some of them that have come to serve at a greater level, and you can tell those are the ones that really changes. So I don't know if you have either, but I mean, there to me, there those of us that have had a way show in our life have seen their profound effects on the other animals in the house as well. When Mai Tai passed, Sundance and I both felt lost without him for some time. We missed that grounding presence and realized, of course, that he didn't leave without us having integrated his teachings, and I believe that. But we had to adjust and integrate them at a deeper level and learn how to do that because of their remarkable impact and ability to have those traits and virtues that we're all trying to have at a higher level, to be able to hold that vibration.
Interesting, because I was just thinking, have any of the animals that I've lived with shown that kind of extraordinary ability? I'm not sure that they have. They've been wonderful in other ways, um, but not that level of. I guess what we're talking about really is instinctive empathy.
That's great terminology. Yeah, I think that they certainly
I
hold those traits.
I think that that's the case, because if I think about Teddy, he's very much in a world of his own. Occasionally, you get flashes of it where he shows empathy. And I can think about when he was not yet one, and we were at a friend's birthday party, and it happens that his best friend at the time um, was part of that household, part of that
Mhm.
family. And because his friend was known to steal food very easily, he was tethered he was with us, but not close to us. And he was upset. And that really upset Teddy. So we actually had to bring his friend in. And I said I'd look after him and make sure he was kept out of trouble. Because Teddy was not happy when he saw his friend unhappy. Equally, is if his friends are, he's very protective of them if they are afraid of another dog. If another dog comes towards them and they're afraid and they react, he reacts instantly. It's like he's going, right, I've got your back. I'm here. Great warrior. So he shows flashes of this
Mhm.
when there's extreme emotion being
Mhm.
displayed by his friends. He doesn't pay that much attention to, he doesn't notice my moods changing so much unless I'm distressed. Then he notices. And if I'm sick, he does not notice at all. So it's certain things where I can see that he's developing this. But the one that I actually think was a way shower was the first animal I lived with, which was a budgie.
Mm.
And he really did connect with us at a level that I think was deeper than average, if I can put it like that.
Mhm.
Just the way he was. And certainly he was the one who opened my door to the animal world and to understanding more about the animal world and wanting to be involved with the animal world, etc. I would have been about 17 at the time that he came in.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, isn't it? Because I'm thinking about what you're saying, and no, I haven't lived with an animal who I would say is at the level that you're talking about, like your cat. But I could see they're not far off.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
particular, my budgie.
Well, and that still doesn't mean that, he's not a way shower. I mean, and we're all in and out of these frequencies, of course. But a lot of the example stories that I have in the book, what I found was that the ones that are truly in that frequency all the time are very detached emotionally, and that they're just holding a presence. And sometimes the people are realizing afterwards, after they're passing, even how they were holding the vibration in the house or in the space. And in fact, they didn't get into any codependent relationships. They didn't want love and treats, and because they were so true in themselves that they just held that space for serving others. And I think you'll see that with people as well that are serving. They're not people pleasing. They're not, they're just holding the vibration. And you'll see all varying levels of that through some of the examples I write in the book. But as we get deeper into it, if you've gotten that far with it, you'll see that they're the ones that are more detached, or the truest way showers that are really working at a high level.
That's interesting because I think that comes up in one of your other books, this idea of detachment, that there are some animals there who are, it's almost like they're not here for the one-to-one relationship. They're here for something bigger. And
Yes.
part of that might be that they hold space for you. And it doesn't mean that they don't love you, but the purpose is not the one-to-one. Whereas and that's interesting because in astrology, the 12 signs, I think embody or symbolize is a better word, this process that we go through from life being about us to being about relationships, on a personal level, to being about relationships with society at large, to being about relationships to being about the relationship with source, with the divine. So there is that in the zodiac wheel. And I'm just thinking about it because of what you said, because it's making me see it in a different context with animals, where if I think about it with Teddy, he's showing, as I said, flashes of something else, that where it's not about him. He's still very much in that infant stage, I would say, of me, me, me,
Right.
and me and you, me and you. Okay, so he's very giving and very loving. So relationship is very important to him. But every so often it stops being about him, and it's definitely only about somebody else. Doesn't last long. It's in that moment. And then he goes, right, you should be okay now. And off he goes. But it's I can see he's moving in that direction, but he's not there yet. Whereas my budgie, I would say was much further on in that. And
Mhm.
my cats were, I think, around Teddy's level, as I would say. So it's just interesting to think of it in that way. And it's not, when I'm saying a process, I'm not implying that one is necessarily better than the other. It's just different. It's hard.
Different
We have to be
places
careful.
on the growth cycle.
Yeah, exactly. We have to be careful that we're not thinking of it as, when we say it's about growth or process, or that one is more advanced than the other. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, having acceptance of where we are is crucial for living an easier life. If we're always thinking we're less than someone else, we're not very happy. And accepting where we are is what enables us to embody these higher growths that the animals in our lives are trying to help us see more clearly.
So let's take an animal who's a way shower then. Does that mean that every life they have from here on end is going to be about that? Or might they dip back into other ways of being? So that one lifetime they're working on one-to-one relationships, and another lifetime it's about, being a light for others, being of service to others. What do you feel?
Well, I don't have that crystal ball, of course, but I believe that every soul has free will, and I can't imagine that we can't we it's whatever our soul wants to grow in and to have what type of experiences. And sometimes with some of these way shower animals, I've noticed and had a really strong sense that they might even be a being from that person's spiritual family, from their soul group, that just decided to incarnate into an animal body to help that person grow more exponentially. And anything is possible, and so we can flit around a bit, and take on
Uh,
whatever type of lives we want for our
so now we're getting into transmogrification, right? Okay.
growth.
So let's think about that for a moment. Could it also be, because we hear about birds in particular being influenced by spirit and acting as, you could say, perhaps omens or communicators
Messengers, yeah.
after, yeah, after a someone in particular has passed on. And I have had absolutely a very odd experience with a magpie, tapping on my window, just maybe about 3 or 4 months after my dad passed. So that's not an everyday occurrence. I don't get magpies tapping on my window on a daily basis. This was a one-off, and I'm absolutely certain that that was that. Now, this is not necessary. It's not my dad taking on the form of a magpie necessarily, but I do wonder whether spirits sometimes are able to influence animals, um, more easily than they are able to influence us.
Well, I think probably because animals are more open and trusting than what people are. Humans can be quite, uh, they can hold more fear. And of course, animals can too, depending on their experiences and their past life experiences around humanity. They're actually quite brave to even be here and be around people. But I think that that's very possible. Yeah, they're gonna they're gonna influence animals, and animals are gonna be, I think, more open to it, as you say, to that type of because it's safer for the person to receive it that way in those situations. Not all people are like that. Some people don't have as much fear around other humans depending on their past. But those of us who, well, I'm speaking for myself, those of us who have had negative experiences with people, are going to be more open to receive teachings through their animals. So why not? Of course, they're going to be able to be influenced more for our growth.
Lovely. What's your favorite part of your book? Or is there a favorite story? I think maybe that's what I want to ask.
I I have the book in three parts. The first part is called their sacred, their purpose, and it talks about all the different levels of the animals and why they're here, with a few example stories too. The second part of the book is what I call the heart of the book, and it's about the sacred partnership that we have with animals. And I have in that section of the book many stories on how people and animals came together. And these people were very vulnerable and gracious to share their love stories with their animals, such that, and the teachings from that particular animal for the reader. There's always a different teaching, I think, that comes through, but there's a specific teaching that comes through from each animal. And there's one that's popping up as you're saying this, as you're asking this. And there's one story about this horse named Maverick. And the female, his mama, Elaine, she had quite a horrific childhood. Was born in a situation where her mom, she wasn't really wanted. She had a 1-year old brother at the time who was quite a handful, so she kind of got pushed in the back. And then her parents got divorced when she was 1 or 2, and then she never had a relationship with her mom. And then her dad went on to be with this wonderful woman who ended up dying when Elaine was 8. And then she was back more with her mom, who would leave her with someone in the afternoons who was sexually abusing her. And well, you kind of get the picture, right? It wasn't a great childhood. And by the time she was a teenager, she had a lot of anger and a lot of unresolved emotional wounds, of course. But one thing saved her, and it was her love of horses. And so she read from the time that she could read, she was reading everything horses. And on every Christmas list, on every birthday, what does she want? I want a horse. I want a horse. It was at the top of the list. And when she was 13, right before her birthday, her father heard tale of a horse that was either going to go to, not to slaughter, but to auction, that he was going to be let go of. And they had looked at many other horses that just Elaine knew wasn't a fit, that were really cheap as well because they couldn't afford a lot. And Maverick was this horse that was also kind of abandoned. He wasn't supposed to happen, so he was left in a field by himself. Nobody really cared about him. And from the time that Elaine and her dad and this gentleman, I don't think he was abused, he was just not tended to and cared about. And Elaine, of course, related to that. But as soon as Maverick walked into the area, the fenced area where Elaine was standing, Elaine's 13 at this time. He kind of runs. He goes right up to her. There's two men, but he goes right up to her, and he does this big snort, and then he starts doing this dance, like this peacock dance around her. And then he comes back around and stops right in front of her again, and he leans in and he just gives her this big slurp. And that was the beginning of their fabulous awakening journey together and healing journey. And Maverick was a way shower. And I really, really, for anyone who's watching this, I urge you to read their story, if nothing else, in the book, because they went on a healing journey of service. That Maverick was used for hundreds of children, handicapped children, to ride, who have make a wish, who it was their last wish to ride a horse. Elaine would trailer up Maverick and they would go together, and they healed each other. It is one of those stories. And she awakened, through this process of this extraordinary horse that held this transformational healing space, even for her anger. Even when she would take out her anger on him when she was younger, because she had no place else to take it, he would walk towards her like, yes, give it to me. I can transmute that. And even when she went back in college to ask for his forgiveness, when she realized that, oh my gosh, I actually took things out on him. Even then, he stepped in and put his nose right on her heart, like, there is nothing to forgive. I'm going to cry. He was just an extraordinary horse. He just passed last year. But it's amazing what animals can do, and no other human could do for her.
No, that's right. And horses particularly have a reputation for helping autistic children too.
Yes. And they're
Mhm.
out in nature much more. So they're really in the midst of both worlds. They're in the spiritual world and they're grounding into Mother Earth in ways that they can move out energy. Those of us that are in the house more, it's a little different experience. But horses are just so grounding, and their energy fields are so massive.
And I think there's something about being a herd animal as well, because if you're a herd animal, then you have to be tuned in to the others in the herd. So, although horses obviously are very often, sadly, on their own, or they might be in a field with some other horses, and it's not necessarily a herd like a wild, um, they called herds when they're with wild horses. Um, I can't think, but I'm sure everybody understands what I'm saying. When they're out together in the wild, if you see wild horses, it's not going to necessarily be the same as a few horses in a field. But nevertheless, they're herd animals, and they still have that instinct to tune in, because you kind of have to, a bit like how do birds know where to fly when they're flying in formation? That's a very instinctive thing, and it makes me
There's an
wonder.
oversoul, I think. I think
Yeah,
there's an oversoul over the pack or over the flock or whatever. And even, Elaine got many horses after that, and Maverick, all of them, as soon as they met Maverick, they knew that he was the one that was in charge. They just followed him. And he never did it through, aggression or, it was just to be the flip of an ear. I mean, that was the presence he held. It's extraordinary. So
it,
yes, I agree with you. They're in sync, and I see it when I look at it energetically as an oversoul and over the whole pack or over the whole flock, because they're in complete synchronicity with each other's energy. It's a beautiful thing to watch, isn't it?
it is. It's really very beautiful. In fact, listening to you, and this is not a horse; it's a dog. But there is a very famous, wonderful animal behaviorist, Patricia McConnell, who wrote a book a few years ago now. And I'm just trying to remember the title of the book. I can't off the top of my head, but it was about her journey, funnily enough, with a border collie. And this is after she's very well established as a very well known behaviorist and working with reactive dogs. And along came Will. And Will was a massive challenge for her. But what happened is that this dog that often had her in tears, not knowing what to do, was also the dog that helped her heal her wounds. And that he had qualities that others did not have. So it's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Because we may think of way showers in a particular as being of a particular type, but who's to say that Will wasn't? He was a very wounded soul who came in, was very, very special in other ways, quite extraordinary in many ways. And if I remember correctly, he actually saved her life um, at one point. But it it was not an easy relationship to begin with, especially.
Yes, I mean I think there's a lot of truth to that, in that we're always going to, at a soul level, we're going to be calling in these partnerships that are going to help us in the manner that our soul desires. And animals are able to step right into that instinctively and help us in ways that humans can't. So yes, absolutely, it's possible. And we've all had those experiences too, where there are animals that might push our buttons or might help us mirror a part of ourself that we have repressed, so that it can shed light on it, so that it can be transmuted, and we'll heal together.
That's right. Well, for those who are interested, the title of the book, I think, has arrived in my mind. I think it was called The Education of Will, by Patricia McConnell. I don't think I'm far off if I'm not exactly right. So if you're interested, you can also look that up. Between Tammy's and this one, you will have, I think, a few happy hours of reading. So this is a good point at which to remind everyone that the book we are talking about is called Animal Way Showers. And I'm loving it, as I have loved every one of Tammy's books, which is why she keeps coming back. And I am so grateful for you, Tammy, to have made the time to join us again.
Oh, thank you. This has been wonderful. I love talking about animals with you.
It's an absolute joy. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at the healing power of humming. Until then, goodbye.